So we're going to start by finding the area and the perimeter of the rectangle. So what's the formula for area of a rectangle? Length times width. You guys have it on that sheet right in front of you. You need to remember it for the quiz. So what is the length of this rectangle? Alexis?
Yeah.
So the length is the x, and what's the width? X plus 4. It doesn't matter which one you put first, which one you say the length is, which one you say the width is. If I'm multiplying 3 times 4, what's the answer? 12. If I'm multiplying 4 times 3, what's the answer? 12. So when you're multiplying, it ends up being the same thing. Okay? So it doesn't matter which one you call the length and which one you call the width. So we need to distribute the x to the x and the 4. So what would we get for the area? X squared plus 4x.
How'd you get the x squared?
So we multiplied the x times x. So x times x is x squared. And then we multiplied the x times the 4. So that gave us 4x.
Wasn't the x a 1?
Right, so the coefficient in front is a 1 on both of these. But when you're multiplying x times x, it's x squared with a squared on top. So that, like, the x squared, the coefficient will still be 1 in front. But you don't need to put that. Okay, so perimeter. What's the formula for perimeter of a rectangle? 2L plus 2W. So what did we say the length was? X. And what's the width? So we have 2 times x plus 2 times x plus 4. So we have 2x. And then for this, we need to distribute the 2 to the x and the 4. So we would do plus 2x and plus 8. So what is 2x plus 2x? 4x plus 8. So that would be the perimeter. Any questions on area and perimeter of a rectangle? Ready to move on to triangle? Okay. So let's find the area of the triangle. What's the formula for area of a triangle? 1/2 base times height. What would be our base? 10. And what would be our height? 2x. Because remember, the base and the height are the ones that form the right angle. So we have 1/2 times 10 times 2x. So now we multiply these 3 together, and we would get 10x. Yes?
I don't understand how you got 2x.
So let's start by taking these two, 1/2 and 10. What's 10 times 1/2? 5. And then we still have to multiply this by 2x. So what's 5 times 2x?
10.
10x. So that's how we got 10x. So now let's find the perimeter of the triangle. What's the formula for perimeter of a triangle? A plus B plus C. So what would our A be and B and C? What are we adding together here? Haley, what are we adding together? X plus 6 plus 10 plus 3x. Because the perimeter would be as if we were walking along the outside of the triangle and we add up everything we walk. So we're not including the 2x in this because we're only adding the sides. So now we combine the like terms. So we have x and 3x. What's x plus 3x? 4x. And 6 plus 10? And that would be our area. Oh, that was our perimeter. I'm sorry.
Question.
Yes.
The triangle, how you put x plus 6 plus 10, does it matter the order of what you put the numbers?
No. Because if I added 2 plus 4, what would it be?
6.
And if I added 4 plus 2? Okay. This is the perimeter. Any questions on area or perimeter of a triangle? Ready to move on to a square? Okay. What is the area of a square? What's the formula? S squared. So our S is 4.8 squared. What's 4.8 times 4.8? So this would be 23.04. And we can't forget about the centimeters. So notice how the first two shapes didn't give us any units, but this one does. So we have to tack on the centimeters squared. Because when we're dealing with area, the unit has to be squared. So let's look at, we're still working on area. If we have 4.8 centimeters times 4.8 centimeters, we get 23.04. And then we have 2 centimeters. So what would be centimeters times centimeters? Centimeters squared. So when dealing with area, the unit will always be squared. So now let's look at the perimeter. What's the formula for perimeter of a square? 4s. So this would be 4 times 4.8. So the perimeter would be 19.2 centimeters. And this one's just centimeters when dealing with perimeter. Because if we looked at this step, 4 times 4.8 centimeters, we only have 1 centimeters, so our answer is only going to have 1 centimeters. So when dealing with area, your answer will always be the unit squared. So this one, it gave you centimeters. On the test, it could give you feet, so it would be feet squared when dealing with area. Any questions on these three? Ready to move on to circles? Yes? Do you have a question? Okay, pi. So find the circumference and area of each circle. So we have a circle with the radius of 2. Let's find the circumference first. What's the formula for circumference of a circle? 2 pi times the radius, which is r. So what would our radius be in this one? So 2 pi times 2. So the circumference would be 4 pi centimeters. Because remember, the radius is 2 centimeters. So now let's find the area. What's the formula for area of a circle? Pi r squared. So the area will be pi times 2 centimeters squared. What's 2 centimeters squared? So 4 pi centimeters squared. Look, same as circles. When we're dealing with area, it's centimeters squared. Yes?
On the quiz, will we be doing it in like terms of pi also?
Yes.
Okay.
Sarah, you have a question?
When you're like multiplying, do you have to do it with pi or do you just leave it in the answer?
Since we're not going to have a calculator on the quiz, you would just leave pi in the answer. So the answer would be 4 pi centimeters squared. I don't expect you to multiply 4 times 3.14. Okay. So now let's look at number 5. So we have a circle with the diameter of 12 feet. If the diameter is equal to 12 feet, what would the radius be? 6 feet. So now let's find the circumference. The circumference is 2 pi r. So what's r? So 2 pi times 6 feet. So what would our circumference be? 12 feet. Now let's find the area. What's the formula for area of a circle? Pi r squared. So we have pi. What's our r? 6 feet squared. So the area is 36 pi feet squared. So it's the feet that's squared. The pi is just along for the ride. So for number 6, we don't have to know this one. You can cross it out. You will not have a question like that on the quiz. Any questions on 4 and 5? Maya? Yep. Any questions on circles? So can we move on to 1.6? Yes? So find the coordinates of the midpoint MN with endpoints M, -2, 6, and N, 8, 0. So the formula for midpoint would be M is equal to x1 plus x2 over 2. So we're taking the average of the x coordinates, and y1 plus y2 over 2, the average of the y coordinates. So if we look at our points here, we have M and N. Let's call M our first point, so we have x1 and y1. And N will be our second point, so we have x2 and y2. So now we can just plug in the numbers into the formula that we have. So we have x1 is -2 plus x2, which is 8 over 2, and y1 is 6 plus y2 is 0 over 2. It helps to label them like how we did up here. That way you know what exactly you're plugging into the formula. So now -2 plus 8 is 6 over 2, and 6 plus 0 is 6 over 2. 6 over 2 is equal to 3. So our midpoint would be 3, 3. So that's number 1. Now let's look at number 2. K is the midpoint of HL. H has coordinates of 1, -7, and K has coordinates 9, 3. Find the coordinates of L. So this is the midpoint, and H is one of the endpoints. So we can call 1 x1, and -7 would be y1, because this is our first point. The second endpoint we have is L, which is what we need to find. That's not given. So we can call L, since it's our second point, x2 and y2. So we have the coordinate for the midpoint that's given. So we would plug that into the M in our equation. So we have 9, 3 is equal to the midpoint formula, which would be x1 plus x2 over 2 and y1 plus y2 over 2. So we have x1 and y1. Let's plug those in. So 9, 3 is equal to x1 we said was 1. So 1 plus, we don't know what x2 is yet, so we just leave that, over 2, comma, y1 is -7, and we don't know what y2 is yet, so we just leave that there. So now we have 9, 3 is equal to the formula that we have for the midpoint. So since 9 was given, this is what the x-coordinate of the midpoint is. This is the equation that we have for the midpoint, for the x-coordinate of the midpoint. So we can set 9 equal to the equation we have. So 9 is equal to 1 plus x2 over 2. So to get that 2 out of the bottom, we multiply both sides of the equation by 2. So those 2's cancel out. So we'll have 9 times 2 is equal to 18, which is equal to 1 plus x2. So now we subtract 1 from both sides, and we have 17 is equal to x2. Now we can go back up to the top, and we can cross this 2x out, this x2 out, and we know that this is equal to 17. But now we need to find y2. So we have the y coordinate for the midpoint that's given. And then we have a formula for the y coordinate. So we can set these equal. So we have 3 is equal to -7 plus y2 over 2. And we do the same thing as we did for the last one. So to get the 2 out of the bottom, we multiply by 2 on both sides of the equation, so these 2's cancel out. We have 6 is equal to -7 plus y2. We add 7 to both sides, so the 7's cancel out, and we have 13 is equal to y2. So we can take this, go back to our points for L, cross out the y2, and put 13. So our coordinates for L would be 17, 13. And that's the answer to number 2. So now let's look at number 3. Find the distance to the nearest tenth between S and T. So we're going to do that one to the side here. So we have S is 6, 5, and T is -3, -4. So now it's asking us to find the distance. So we're going to use the distance formula. So we have D is equal to the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. So we can look at S as our first point and call this x1. This would be y1. T will be our second point, so x2 and y2. So now we have D is equal to, and we just plug in our numbers into the equation we have. So x2 is -3 minus x1, 6 squared plus y2 is -4 minus y1, which is 5 squared. So D is equal to the square root of -3 minus 6 is -9 squared plus -4 minus 5, -9 squared. So D is equal to the square root of -9 squared is 81 plus 81. So the distance is equal to the square root of 162. And you can just leave your answer like that. You don't need to simplify any further. So the distance between S and T would be the square root of 162. So that is number 1, 2, and 3. We do not need to worry about number 4 for the quiz we're going to take on Tuesday. So find the lengths of AB and CD and determine whether they are congruent. To find the lengths of A, B, and CD, we can either use the Pythagorean theorem or we can use the distance formula. So for AB, let's use the Pythagorean theorem, and for CD, we can use the distance formula. So Pythagorean theorem is A squared plus B squared is equal to C squared. So in order to do that, we need a right triangle, and we need an A squared, or we need an A and we need a B. So we can call the base of this triangle A, and we're going over 1, 2, 3 units, so the length of side A will be 3, and the length of side B, since we're only going up 1, would be 1. So we will take, so we're finding the length of AB, and it is A squared plus B squared is equal to C squared. And since A is 3, we would do 3 squared plus 1 squared, which is equal to C squared. So 3 squared would be 9, plus 1 squared, which is 1, is equal to C squared. So we have 10 is equal to C squared. To get rid of this squared that's on the C, we would do the square root. So the square root and the squared cancel out, and we would have to do a square root to the left side of the equation too. So it would be square root 10 is equal to C. And that would be the length of AB. square root 10. So now let's use the distance formula finding CD. So to find the length using the distance formula, we need to find the points that correspond to C and D. So the coordinates for point C would be -1, -2, because you're going to the left on the x-axis, 1, and then you're going down, 2. And the coordinates for D would be 2, -3, because you're going to the right on the x-axis 2, and then you're going down 3. So the distance formula we know is the square root of x2 minus x1 squared, which is plus y2 minus y1 squared. So we can call C our first point. So 1 will be our x1, 2 will be our y1, -2 will be our y1, 2 will be our x2, and -3 will be our y2. So now we can just plug those into the equation. So x2 is 2 minus x1, -1, so it'd be squared, plus y2, which is -3, minus y1, which is -2, and that would be squared. So we have the square root of 2 minus -1. Remember, this becomes a big plus sign. So we have 2 plus 1, which would be 3 squared, plus -3 minus -2. So this becomes a big plus sign. So we have 3 plus 2, which is -1 squared. So we have the square root of 3 squared is 9, plus -1 squared is 1. So the distance will be the square root of 10. So the length of CD is root 10. So if you see, we got the same answer for both AB and CD. So therefore, the length of AB is congruent to the length of CD. So on the quiz, you can either do the distance formula if you have a problem like this and you need to find the length, or you could use the Pythagorean theorem, whichever one works best for you.